going to tell. I want you to pair up with the person who's next to you, and each of you tell it to the other person. Now, the person that's telling cannot look at the script. The person who's not telling looks at the script, and you help the person who is telling. Okay? Now, when you start telling it, you won't tell it very well, but that's okay. It won't take you but just a minute to catch on to it. So, starting right now, start telling it to the person next to you, and take turns. You want to go over here, maybe? Tell it out loud now. Tell it out loud. You need somebody to tell to? Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We got an extra lady right here if you want to grab one of them. Randy's going to do it okay. Okay, how was that experience for you?
It was good. I need to be
Okay. Well, once you start telling it, that kind of builds. First time through. Anybody else make a comment about what your experience was as you learned that? Were you afraid to talk? Were you afraid to try it? Anybody? Afraid to start it first. Okay, that's typical. Yeah. It's like what?
It's kind of like you put yourself there and imagine.
That's the best kind of storytelling. If you see it in your mind, and then you're trying to put that same picture in somebody else's mind, that's what storytelling is. Okay? Now what we're going to do, the next phase of this exercise is that we need several of you brave people to come up here one by one and tell this story as best you can. You know you're not going to get it perfect, but that's okay. Once you tell it publicly, you'll never forget it. I promise you that. It sticks down there. So who wants to be first? Come stand up here and tell that. Look at this, volunteering somebody else. Now we'll give you a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to start volunteering some folks here. Oh, come on up here. Come stand here because they want to tape you for posterity.
I'm not too exuberant, really.
Don't worry about it. You use your hands as much as you can, your body language as much as you can. But hey, this is a practice run. All of us are just getting started with this story.
All right, here we go. If I can remember, I'm pretty much know it. All right, Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, and there was a blind named Bartimaeus, and he was yelling out to Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on me!" He kept on yelling that, and the disciples around him were telling him to be quiet, shut up. They were mocking him, and he kept on getting louder and louder, and then Jesus stopped and told his disciples to go get him. And as they went to go get him, they told him to cheer up, that Jesus, you're going to go talk to Jesus, and Jesus is going to talk to you. So he put on his coat and jumped up and went to Jesus. And Jesus asked Bartimaeus, "What can I do for you?" And the blind man said he wanted to see. And Jesus said, "Your faith has healed you, so you can see." And as they were leaving out of Jericho, the man followed him.
Thank you. Now, one thing that we do to keep the story straight, after we tell it, we always give everybody a chance to say if anything was left out or if anything was said wrong. So this is not criticism for you or for anybody else that's up here. We're just trying to keep the story straight. Did anybody find anything that was left out or was said wrong? Okay, he took off his, that was the most important part. I think he took off his cloak. Okay.
He put his coat on.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not what you meant, was it?
No.
Okay. See, that's significant because that cloak, they say, was the symbol of a blind man. He threw it away. Because he threw it away. He knew he wasn't going to be blind anymore. He wasn't going to need it. So, anyway, that's extra biblical. Don't you dare put that in your story. All right, who's next? Who wants to give it a shot? Come on. I really like to hear this sister back here in the corner tell it because I was watching her and she's a good. Come on up here. Come try to tell it.
Don't you preach. You just tell.
You get points off for preaching now.
As Jesus and his disciples and the multitude came to Jericho, they was passing through Jericho and they were leaving Jericho. Just as they were leaving Jericho, Jesus was leading the crowd. The crowd was surrounded by him with excitement. And as they were going, they saw a man sitting alongside the road, blind Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus heard the crowd, and he could sense that this was Jesus of Nazareth. He said, Son of David, have mercy on me, with confidence in his voice, that Jesus was going to hear him. The crowd said to him, Jesus said, tell him to come to me. The crowd told the man to come to Jesus. They heard the man's voice of confidence. Come to me. He threw off his cloak as if he knew he was going to be healed. He went to Jesus. I could see that Jesus saw the confidence in him. He went to Jesus. Jesus said, what can I do for you? Hearing the faith in his voice, what can I do for you? He said, that I may receive my sight. That I may receive my sight. And Jesus said, your faith, thy faith has made you to see, has made him whole. And he got up and followed Jesus. And that's the end of the story.
All right, let's talk about that telling for a minute. Is there anything anybody would like to say about that way that she told the story?
That was perfect.
She held our attention.
She did that. You told it dramatically. You got in touch somewhat with the emotional content of the story. The one thing that I would say is be careful not to stray from the text, because these stories are preserved that way because they're powerful just the way they are. So if we start straying from the text, we risk weakening the story instead of strengthening it. But you did a really good job. Okay? Who else? We want to have one other person only. So this is your chance.
We left out.
Oh, I'm just an old retired teacher. Besides, I didn't get through the story.
Well, come on, come on.
Here's the mic. Get close to the mic.
Okay, all right. One day, as Jesus and the disciples were headed into Jericho, there began to be a big crowd that was gathering around them. And the crowd got bigger and bigger, and by the time they got to the other side of Jericho, it was a humongous crowd, and they were so loud, and everybody was happy and excited. They were in the presence of Jesus, this one that everybody had heard about. Jesus is here, Jesus is here. And along the side of the road, there was a beggar, a blind beggar, and his name was Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus began to hear the people, and he began to hear Jesus, Jesus, and enough. He heard enough to know this is Jesus. This is the one I've heard about. This is Jesus. And he said, Jesus, Jesus, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And he kept crying, and he was more and more agitated, and I could imagine him just breathing there on the ground. And the people were saying, hush, shut up, be quiet. Stay down. Jesus, of course, realized that Bartimaeus was there, and he said, tell him to come to me. So someone ran over and said, Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus, take heart. Be of good cheer. Jesus has asked for you. And Bartimaeus, the very idea that Jesus had called for him, he threw off his coat and he rushed, he was blind, and he was just rushing and trying to get there, and the people were beginning to nudge him toward Jesus because they knew that Jesus was calling him. And that's as far as I got.
Whoa! Somebody finish that up. We can't leave him like that. Finish it up, finish it up. Come on now. Come on. We got to finish that story.
One thing I got out of the story, and everybody was good, is that when he took off his coat, Jesus seen that he had the faith to believe that he can heal him. And I say he had the faith, and God had the power to do it, and he did it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let me just remind you again, when you tell these stories, learn them textually. Learn them the way they're in the Bible. And don't embellish, like we tell the Indian storytellers, don't put any masala on them. Don't put spice on them. They don't need spice. They got plenty of spice in them already. And one thing that all three of these storytellers left out of the story, anybody know what it was? There you go. Oh, Timaeus got left out of it. I mean, that was his son, and he didn't get in the story. All communicators like that, because this wasn't just any old blind man. This was Timaeus' son. Yeah. Okay. So that's how you learn a Bible story. Teresa was standing outside of Best Buy over in Pensacola. It was about 10 minutes early, and some people were waiting out there. And this guy was standing there next to her, and he said, we got 10 minutes to kill. Tell me a story. Like that. And she'd been praying, of course, for opportunities. So she started telling the story about the widow of Nain, who had the funeral, where she had lost her son, and Jesus came in. And so she told that story, and he said, that's an old story. What else did he say? He said, that's an old story. And I forget how it went, but you ended up telling him another story too, another Bible story. So you never know when you'll get an opportunity. It's an easy way to do it. Say, hey, can I tell you a story? And if you don't feel free to do that, say, hey, I'm in this really weird class, and they want us to tell stories. Can I practice on you? So, okay, we're going to watch some more videos in a minute, but I want to give us a few minutes here for questions. If any of you have any questions about this that you want to ask, and I'll try to answer them. See if it's something we can answer. Are there any questions?
Where there are, just several gospels have the same. Where several gospels tell the same story, but one adds some detail that the other might leave out, is it okay to combine the gospel stories, all of the accounts of that one story?
My professor would say, don't mess with the man's story. Tell it the way he told it. But I glean from different accounts because I want to tell it as full and as interesting as I can without adding any of my own stuff to it.
Right.
So I would say I would do it.
Okay.
Yeah. The one thing is if you're telling the whole book of Mark, don't be putting Matthew and Luke and other people in there. Just tell it the way Mark told it. But if you're just telling one episode, one incident, well, it's your story. You can tell it how you want. Yeah.
I know you have those videos over there, those DVDs, but do you and Teresa have DVDs that you've made, like when you teach the whole thing to the people who are coming to you?
We don't, because it's all in other languages. And so Teresa and I will tell, out of 12 stories, we might tell 3 to a translator. And as quickly as possible, we switch over to the native speakers because it's just much quicker and much better to have the native speakers telling it.
Okay.
We have, I believe, one CD there that has 7 stories on it. It's also on our website that you can listen to it on our website. But it's not video, it's just audio.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a listing or an outline of the stories in the class that you gave over the 240 hours?
Yeah. We've got a complete list, and each story comes with a mnemonic symbol because we're dealing with non-readers. So each one will have a little symbol. For instance, the story of the flood will have a box with wavy lines underneath it. So you look immediately, you'll know that's the story of the flood. You don't have to read the title.
Can we get a copy of that somehow?
If you'll email me, or I can send it here and you can duplicate it for whoever wants it. I have it in PDF.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good.
When telling the story, you said don't add spice to it or embellish it in any way. Does that include possibly like setting it, like the climate and the setting of the area? Or, I mean, can you like do that? You understand what I'm saying?
I'd be real careful about adding to it. The one thing that Teresa does sometimes is she'll tell it first person. Like
Like
she'll
she's
be
there.
Mary.
Yes.
But she does that to get in touch with the story emotionally. But as much as possible, she'll tell it exactly the way it is in the Bible. So anytime these stories are like pebbles that have rolled down the stream bed of the ages, and they've gotten polished until they're a beautiful, brilliant polish on them. And when you go adding things to it, it's like imperfection. So I'd be real careful about that. First of all, learn them the way they are in the Bible. And then if you feel like you want to maybe stop, well, even there, it's better to say it before or after if you want to add, because otherwise people will be confused. They
Yeah,
won't know what's your
like
words and what's the...
imagine it like this, possibly.
Yeah, you could say that. You could just take a break now, like I did with the bush.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and you knew right away that was me talking and not the story.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Good. Well, what we're going to do now? Yeah, Glenn.
One of the things, of all people, one of the things that we're looking to do over at Globe is have a Friday night, Saturday session where Paul and Teresa would teach several storytelling events. Basically, you would take all that you've learned here, come into that session, and you would learn stories so that when you left on Saturday afternoon, you would have, how many? 6, 8 stories that you could tell.
Depending on the length.
Right. What we probably would do would open that up to you guys too, and let you know when that's going to happen. And because for me, I figure that you figure the more the merrier.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something we're looking at doing through Globe, because our folks are excited about the possibilities of better telling better stories. I'm also speaking out, probably out of place, but if you could put together folks here, I'm pretty sure you guys might come over and do that here.
As long as we're in the area, we're glad.
In the
to do it,
area,
yeah.
right. So you can coordinate it with us at the office or directly with Paul and Teresa, it doesn't matter. But I know this is something that when this gets in you, you start thinking about how can I expand my knowledge and do this better. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at. We talked about it on the way over. Is that okay if I make a
We have a lot,
commercial
those
pitch
things
there?
are a lot of fun. We usually have lunch together on Saturday, and we have different opportunities to have some performance, some story performance by groups, maybe dramatize some of the stories. They're a blast. We just have a great time. So, thank you. Okay. For?
Start over, Sonny. I'm just asking, how long should your story be? Should it be 15 minutes long, 30 minutes long?
You can tell Mark in 2 hours and 20 minutes, starting from the first verse and ending
Yeah,
up with
but
the
what
last.
I'm asking, if you start on that, is in your situation, in your audiences that you've had in the past, do they sit and expect everything?
Well, it depends on your
Or do you
situation.
see them, some of them?
No, not when we tell the story.
Well,
They
that's what I'm
listen.
asking. Is the time span
Well,
short?
we tell the story the way it is in the Bible. Now, our storytellers, being oral communicators, we have one storyteller who's a well digger, a different well digger, and he said, when I tell the story, of course they're paying him by the day, but he starts telling stories, and pretty soon people want him to sit down and tell stories and stop working. He said, I can stretch it out to 4 hours. So it all depends on your situation. It's getting late. Let's watch these videos that we want to watch, because I really don't want you to miss these. We're gonna watch 2, then I'm going to say something, then we'll watch the last one.
Campus Crusade for Christ has taken an interest in orality for one simple reason: greater effectiveness. Through the years, we have continually sought to improve how we engage in evangelism and discipleship. For example, the 4-Law booklet was developed several decades ago to improve the ability of the average student or layperson to communicate the gospel. Billions of copies have been distributed through the years, and no doubt tens of millions of people have come into the kingdom of God as a result. When I first heard about oral learners, though, it was obvious to me that we would not likely reach them best with a written tool like the 4 Laws. We needed to tell stories and in other ways communicate so that oral learners can understand and respond. But why should this be surprising? I think back in my own experience and realize that even literate people tend to remember stories and other illustrations better than lists of points. Effective speakers know that and include stories in their talks. So the issue regarding the use of principles of orality for us really is to be more effective. The biggest obstacle in reaching oral learners is that many missionaries and pastors are still using literate methods to reach them. I think the main reason for that is they are not completely aware of the magnitude of the disconnect. Until recent years, most of the principles of orality were not being widely discussed in missions and ministry circles. I suspect that people just continue to use the methods that were used in the past and assume people weren't all that interested when there was a low response rate. But now we know better, and we can radically improve our ability to minister. The biggest remaining barrier is reluctance to change. Most of us lean toward continuing with what we have been doing. It's easier. It doesn't incur the pain of understanding new things and failing in our early attempts at doing something new. I would certainly hope that obstacle would not last long. At stake is the eternal destiny of billions of people. Let me give an example that's a little different than dealing with primary oral learners, that is, people who can't read. This example occurred with secondary oral learners, people who can read but don't prefer to learn by reading. In September of 2005, I and Campus Crusade's campus director at the University of Central Florida and 4 student Bible study leaders embarked on an experiment. We wanted to develop a totally new Bible study series to teach the essentials of spiritual growth and multiplication. Over the next 4 months, we developed 12 lessons using the principles of orality. Group members were invited to start to apply lessons learned within the next week. They were also asked to explain to one of their friends what they were learning. Within 4 months, the number of study groups grew from 2 to 8, and the number of students in the groups grew from 20 to 60. 1/3 of the original group members sought to start second-generation groups. One of the second-generation leaders said, "This is so easy, anyone could do it." It is indeed much easier to communicate to people in the way that they prefer to learn. Let me explain the importance of using the principles of orality by using a business illustration. Let's say you and I had a company, and we found out that 70% of our target audience had a very distinct way of listening and learning. They don't read. They don't write. They don't even understand what a written word is. What would we do? Well, we would alter our approach dramatically. We certainly wouldn't distribute written brochures to the 70%. We would talk to them about our product. To do less than that would likely put us out of business. Well, so it is in ministry.
For years, those of us who have been involved in evangelism around the world have dreamed of the day that we could actually say that we have taken the gospel to every part of the world. The Finishing the Task movement is focused on 639 people groups over 100,000 that contain 90% of the unengaged, unreached peoples of the world, about 550 million. These are people that currently have no access to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what's staggering is that most of them are oral learners. If we're going to reach them, we're going to have to do it in a new way. Oral societies prefer to learn through proverbs, music, poetry, and especially stories. It's the way we learned before we went to school. And it's not just true in these societies. Increasingly, those who've already learned to read have given it up.